Hi everybody, my name is Arjun and welcome to my channel called the Nimble Nomad. On this channel we basically discuss my experiences in the UK and tips, tricks and hacks to survive and thrive in the UK. If you're anything like me and a first generation immigrant, then you're going to make a couple of mistakes and that's absolutely fine. But I just want to share my experiences and help others who probably have had similar experiences or want to find a way around the challenges that I faced when I moved to the UK.
Remember, Simi, no one here can know I am royalty. You must appear to be no different than the average man.
I will not say a word.
In this video, basically, this is my first video, frankly speaking, and we're going to be covering a couple of tips and tricks that you need to be aware of when you first come to the UK. Now, some of these are going to be quite intuitive, but if you're anything like me, when you first move to the UK, you expect things to be really easy.
Halt!
Anyway, so let's get into it.
Be strong.
Now, let's just backtrack. So I moved to the UK about 10 years ago, all by myself, and I thought that, I was moving from India here, and I thought it would be a very straightforward process, specifically because it was a Western country, things were a lot more sort of developed and systematically set up. And I found it a bit frustrating, frankly speaking, because some of the things don't actually work as you think they would. Now, this is not to say that other people will also have the same experiences, but this is just my take on these experiences. Now, the key things that I'm going to be talking about in this video are basically housing, bank accounts, healthcare, internet and telephone, and lastly, travel in London. Now, these are 5 critical things that I think anybody and everybody needs to know about when they come to the UK. And there are some tips and tricks that you need to be aware of as you nuance around these. So the first 2 things, housing and bank accounts, are pretty intertwined. You can't have one without the other. So I'm going to talk about them sort of simultaneously, right? So if you're anything like me, when you first move to the UK and you're not going to live with family or friends, then you need a place to live. And typically you do that by renting. So when you're renting, you have a couple of options, right? So option number 1 is you can basically flat share, this is a common thing that you can do in the UK. Basically, you rent a big apartment with 2 or 3 rooms in it, or a house, and you have similar people or people with sort of similar interests and tastes or age groups, not necessarily in that order, but living in the same space. What that helps is that you only then pay for a share of the total rent for the apartment. And this is a great way, especially if you're trying to save some money, especially because London's quite expensive. You might want to share an apartment. And one of the best resources out there for sharing an apartment or finding a place to live together and flatmate, especially if you don't know anybody, like I didn't, is Spare Room. Now, this is basically a website where people will advertise we've got a room, or we're planning to get a house, then we're looking for a third or a second flatmate, and I'd like to move in with X, Y, and Z. So you can list your preference. So people who are out there looking for flatmates can list their preferences, and you, on the other hand, if you're looking to rent with somebody and generally don't know anybody, then this is a great way to find some place. Now, the other option is if you're quite picky, or you already know somebody that you want to live with, or you just want to live outright by yourself, then you can rent a house or a flat by yourself. Now, this is a slightly more expensive option if you're renting completely individually, because you're going to be paying the whole price as a rent, obviously, and also you're going to be paying for utility. But the best way to do that is to find a flat through Rightmove. Now, usually on Rightmove, you will have flats listed or properties listed in different parts of the cities, and not to mention when you first move into either of the options, by the way, you will have to pay a 6-week, well, it used to be 6 weeks, now it's a 5-week deposit upfront. And there are some admin charges like a background verification and small fees, I think, for getting the contract written up. So you just need to be aware of these things. Now, the second aspect that you need to be aware of is your bank account. Now, obviously, when you rent an apartment or a flat or a house, you need to pay the landlord. But if you've just rocked up in the UK after you've gotten through immigration, you're probably not going to have a bank account. So how do you pay for them? So you need to have a bank account set up. And the only way you can get a bank account set up is by physically walking into a bank. Now, this is a bit tricky because in order to get a bank account, you need a residential address to where the bank can send you your debit card, your bank documents, and all the other things that come with opening a new bank account. So this is a bit tricky. If you get my wind, basically, so you need a residence to have a bank account, but then at the same time, you need a bank account to pay the resident. So this is a bit tricky, and the only way that you can, and some of the ways that you can come across this or get over this hurdle is basically getting a reference letter. Now, if you're a student, you can ask your university to give you a reference letter, or if you're an employee with a fairly reputable company, or even just any company, they will give you a reference letter which you can then take to the bank. And usually the reference letter says, person X or Y works or studies in this university or workplace, and gets paid X, Y, and Z, and or the duration of their educational course is for so long, and therefore they need a bank account, and that acts as your sort of leeway into it. So the underpinning factor that you need to think about when you're considering either a house or your bank account before you come to the UK is don't rush into finding a place before you come to the UK. Yes, you may think, okay, you can save on a couple of quid or pounds by having a place before you show up. But as I've just sort of demonstrated, this is a bit tricky because especially if you don't have any family or friends, it may be worth just considering that you come to the UK, look for the property, and then find your place to stay. The other thing that you might want to think about is healthcare. Now, this is a pretty common thing. In most Western countries like the US and Canada, you pay for a monthly or an annual private insurance which covers you. Thankfully, in the UK, we have something called the National Health Service, or the NHS. Now, this is amazing because it's free to access at the point of service. So anybody who is in the UK or is going to basically be working, studying, or living in the UK is given free access to healthcare, and that's paid for by the taxes that you pay for. Now, if you're a non-EU immigrant, so if you come from Asia, Africa, or the Americas, you will need to get a work permit or a student visa to come to the UK. Now, that typically has a surcharge that you may have paid for. Currently, I believe it's £400 a year for every year of your visa. So if you've paid for that, then you're eligible to basically use the NHS. So I think basically the answer to the question is it's free. Now, how do you access it? So the fundamental thing is once you set yourself up, right? So once you've got your house, your bank account, and all that set up, you're going to move in, you're going to sign your rental agreement, and you're going to move into your house. What happens after that is you're going to start getting your bills coming through to your address. Now, what you can do is go onto the NHS website. I will drop a link of that in the description below, and basically you need to then go to the GP, go to the NHS website and find yourself a general practitioner surgery close to your address. So the best way to do that is enter your postcode, and basically once you enter your postcode, the NHS website lists down a whole bunch of surgeries. It has ratings, it has all kinds of services that they provide listed along it, and you can choose the one that you want to go to. And once you've done that, you call them up, and then you just go in and you submit your paperwork and fill out a form, and there you go, you're registered. And going forward, if you have any, God forbid, if you're sick, then you can just go in and get yourself checked. Now, the fourth thing that I'm going to talk about is internet and cell phone or telephone. Now, this is pretty basic and pretty important actually. Now that you've got yourself set up, you want to have internet. I think that's one of the most important utilities in the 21st century, and this is a bit challenging sometimes. So it depends on the kind of internet or that you. So first thing I'll do is I'll talk about the internet. So this can be a bit challenging because to get broadband installed in your house, there's fairly limited number of options that you have. I'm not going to go into the specifics of what options you have, but basically you need to sign up for a contract. Now, these contracts, if you want to get a broadband installed in your house, range from 12 to 18 months to 24 months. So what happens is once you try and get a broadband contract set up, you've entered all your bank details and so on and so forth. You will then have to book a date on which the engineer is going to show up in your house. So that doesn't mean that they send you all the equipment and in a week's time you're up. This can actually be a little bit slow to initiate, so it takes about a couple of weeks to book the appointment with the engineer and have them show up. So what I would recommend is actually as soon as you've got your house set up, I would recommend that you go online and look for an internet company that you want broadband set up with, as that's your best option. Is you're going to try and expedite the process as soon as possible. If, however, you do not feel comfortable with having, being tied into a long contract for 12 or 18 months even, what you can, and you're not sort of a heavy internet user, and you just sort of surf every now and again, and you're just going to be using your cell phone, then what you can do is you can get yourself a small dongle. So these are these small broadband devices which you can carry around with yourself. And you can get 30-day rolling contracts on these with a small broadband usage, and they're quite cheap. I think you can pay about £10 a month for these, and they're quite good. So that's how you get your internet set up. The other bit that you need to be a little bit careful with is cell phones. So similar to broadband, you have contracts which are 12 or 24 month long contracts, typically 24 months, and these can be actually quite expensive because if you add in the cost of the phone and the monthly charge, they can rack up quite quickly in terms of bills. So I would recommend, if you already have a phone and it's not locked to any network in your home country, then I would just recommend doing a SIM only option. When I first moved to the UK, I did that. The provider that I used was giffgaff. I'll add the description and the link in the description below. But giffgaff is a great sort of provider, because what you can do is you do prepaid bundles. So I think you can buy bundles for as low as £5, and you load up data or voice, or data and voice on your phone, and you use it for 30 days, and then when that's done you can renew it, or you can do something else if you don't like it. I found that really useful, and it was a great way to keep costs down when I first moved to the country. The fifth thing that I'm going to talk, and the final thing that I'm going to talk about, is travel. Now, this is pretty important because now you've shown up and you want to get around. And I'm going to specifically talk about travel in London. Travel in London is quite easy. We do this through something called the Tube, which is basically the underground in London. And it's basically a connection of underground and overground trains as well, actually, which take you from point A to point B. So it's a massive network of trains, and they also cover buses. So it's called Transport for London. I will add a link of the website for TfL, Transport for London, on the description below, so you can actually access it and check it out. There's a useful map that shows you the different zones and how you can get around from point A to point B, and you can even add stops and destinations of where people stay and where you want to get to, and it'll chart out the map for you. Of course, in this current environment that we're currently operating in, nobody's actually going anywhere, but hopefully that will help.
They're shooting up for you. Yes, this is perfect.
So that's kind of the top 5 things I personally think are really important when you first move to the UK and help yourself get set up. If you liked this video, or if you had any feedback or comments, please add them below, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, because that will really help me and help me make more videos of the similar type. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much. See you next time.